So that's the bit we are kind of focusing on, which Daily Mirror says about Brenda, the monarch, not wearing the mask. And it says sneakily underneath, doctors ensured safety. Now it's like the special treatment that she was given. No mask for ma'am, but docs ensured safety. It's like the miracle, alleged miracle that Donald Trump is boasting about in the USA, that he's not in danger and he's testing negative, and that he is not afraid of the virus, COVID-19, and he can give the women gathered outside for his rally what he called a fat kiss. I mean, that is defiance on every level. So Brenda, the Queen of England, not wearing a mask yesterday, is being described in the caption in the Daily Mirror that she wore no mask, but safety was ensured by the doctors. That's what they're saying. No mask for ma'am, but docs ensured safety. What is the difference between the doctors ensuring Brenda's safety and other doctors, or even some of the same doctors, treating other kind of persons or preventing exposure to the virus for other people on the parts of other people? So that's where it says, the Mirror, the docs ensured her safety, there in the corner. How do we get this to the correct angle? That is the bit. And we really want to put that on the record. That is what they're saying. So the Daily Mirror should be condemned for that stupid supplication and ingratiation to Brenda, because that is a public health issue. And it's a dangerously irresponsible thing to say that doctors ensured her safety. I mean, what is the difference between doctors treating her, keeping her safe, and the doctors not keeping her subjects who are exposed to the virus safe? What's the difference? The same question and the same list of questions, subsidiary questions, arise from the very hectic kind of stay in a London NHS hospital by Boris Johnson. And then, like Donald Trump, he staged a miracle of a recovery. And no details are known to the subjects or the citizens or the people of Britain who are being treated to or subjected to serial, contradictory curbs on the liberty and freedom and lockdowns and whatever. Either the lockdowns are objective or the lockdowns themselves are linked to prejudice. Either lockdowns are done by people, human beings, or lockdowns are mysterious, animating events that operate themselves and auto-act. What is it that is the actual truth? What is the truth? And the answer is warranted by the fact that thousands of people's lives are at risk, people's livelihoods are at risk. And here is the Daily Mirror editorial or editorializing kind of stupidity. It says on the voice of the Daily Mirror, Rishi must cough up. Now, here is the thing that we are talking about, the money and the pattern of the local councils and the fact that there is no revolt at all. Here is the evidence. Because the Daily Mirror is the one who is talking about a revolt. And in its voice of the Daily Mirror on page 8, the Daily Mirror is saying, Rishi must cough up. The city of Peterloo, Manchester has a good, proud history of fighting inequality and oppression. Now that is absolutely accurate, but not currently, not contemporary, not in the recent past, not in the last 200 years. The city of Peterloo, the Chartists, and the suffragettes is again on the right side of justice. Council leaders across Greater Manchester region are resisting the government's plan to place them in the Tier 3 category of COVID restrictions. This is not a battle about public health. Notice this. Notice this, what we said. We said before we read this. So notice this, that the phoniness of revolt of the Daily Mirror is exposed in its own admission in this stupid editorial. This is not a battle about public health. They're saying it's not a battle about public health at all. What they're saying is everyone wants to subdue the virus. That is a kind of lame lex kind of line. It's about Rishi Sunak's refusal to recognize the economic consequences of the local lockdown. So what they're saying is about money. And Greater Manchester Metro Mayor Andy Barnum is right to stand his ground. He's not revolting. He's standing his ground, not the same thing as revolt. The support package on offer is not sufficient to prevent people losing their jobs. It's not still talking about public health. It's talking about jobs, fine, but it is not about public health. This is not playing politics, as Health Secretary Matt Hancock alleges. This is even local Tory MPs and council leaders oppose the harsher lockdown. If the Chancellor, that is the Economic Finance Minister, Rishi Sunak, does not believe them, he should listen to Dame Louise Casey, the government's former homelessness advisor. Now there they give it away completely. Louise is called by us, our campaign, basing the description of her entirely on her record as lousy, crazy, racist Louise, not Dame Louise Casey. Now, she is the government's former homelessness advisor. Now, if she is homelessness advisor, whether formerly or currently, how come that there are so many people homeless? And where is her role in preventing homelessness? The fact that she is called homelessness advisor, not advisor to prevent homelessness, gives the game away as well. Now, she is cited by the stupid Daily Mirror as a source of wisdom, which gives the Daily Mirror stupidity away as well. They're saying that Louise Crazy warns that people are facing destitution as a result of the measures. Destitution. Is that it? No public health is destitution. It's about money. If Mr. Sunak is worried about money, he could stop throwing billions at private consultants on the failing test and trace system. They come to that part only at the end of it, We need to save jobs and contain COVID. It's time for the chancellor to cough up. Now, it's not saying that we have to contain COVID and save jobs. It's saying save jobs and contain COVID. So it's not about public health. It's about the money first. And the fact that they have mentioned Louise crazy, racist, crazy, gives the going away, because that shows that they're out of touch with the reality of what has been going on in this country. And especially in the context of local councils. So we shall come to a bit more detailed discussion, updated discussion of local councils in the context of the lack of accountability and actual democratic accountability. Local council as well as local as well as public agencies or outfits like the BBC. Louise Creasy was serially wrong and a serial inciter of anti-Muslim hatred and a serial inciter of racist hatred. And she was introduced to the public as a public figure. She was an employee of a government department before, but for some reason, she was able to manipulate her way into the regime of Tony Blair and pose as a source of wisdom. No racist is a source of wisdom, objectively defined. And Louise lousy racist Creasy is no exception. She was introduced and installed in public life as a source of wisdom by the Tony Blair regime. Now that's a long time. It's a Blair was followed by Gordon Brown, was followed by Dave Cameron, and then Cameron has been followed by Theresa May, who has been followed by Boris Johnson. There are 5 separate regimes. And Louise Creasy has remained absolutely successfully installed in one form or another. And today's reference to her by the Daily Mirror merely confirms that the Mirror is taken in by her. Now, she is not only innocent of the charge that is leveled against local councils and the central government about poverty creation, homelessness creation, and other assorted problems that afflict this society, plague this society, regardless of who is fronting the regime at the center of this country. The fact that Louise Creasy was installed by Tony Blair was treated as evidence enough on its own that she had some unique insight into society, into poverty, into housing, homelessness, and all the other things, especially about how the agenda against Muslims generally should be phrased and confected. So she was recruited both over the Pakistani men, mainly Pakistani men, grooming white girls for sexual abuse and rape and other violations. She was also given platforms to opine generally about society, about Muslims and about racism and she has been against Muslims, against Asians, against Africans, against what is called the migrants. And migrants is a code word to denote people from Africa and Asia, and including, as I said, in the context of the last 30 years anti-Muslim agenda, Muslims. So Louise Creasy is not a source of even objective information, let alone as a specially qualified and worthwhile source of wisdom that the Daily Mirror names her in this editorial about the Northern Revolt. We call her crazy because she has been completely, absolutely irrational. She is not a very intelligent person, but she is a very manipulative person, and effectively, she has got connections within the UK uncivil disservice. That is to say, what is otherwise known as civil service. That is to say, the various officials or employees in various central government departments in what is called Whitehall in central London, London WC1 or something. Or this is the place that houses a majority of the departments of central government. That is why it's called Whitehall. This is a street. And the street is not the only place where the government departments are located. There are other streets where the government departments are located, but the departments are collectively known as Whitehall. And Louis Crazy, the racist one, has had various kind of commissions and various kind of consultancy roles, advisor roles in various departments, all to do with society, social definition, poverty, housing, homelessness, and all of those roles she has kind of held, if you like, or grabbed hold of by following the agenda of supporting the denial of rights to most of the people who are affected by the lack of rights and robbery of their rights in local areas by departments and government policy and government legislation. So that is the condemnation, evidential condemnation of the Daily Mirror's stupidity, and the evidence that the Daily Mirror has no clue as to what it is talking about. And Andy Barnum is also overinflated by Pippa Creeder and also by the editors of the Daily Mirror who put that headline together. It wasn't a single person that decided on that headline, but it was a number of them. And that shows that the Daily Mirror is doing just typical tabloid journalism. Instead of the kind of line that the Murdoch scum is following the other side, the other way, where they are celebrating Brenda's kind of defiance of caution, and two fingers she's showing to the ordinary citizens that are supposed to be her kind of subjects. The Daily Mirror is pretending to be on the side of the revolters, but essentially it's not on the side of the revolters, and it's not on the side of the facts, if you like. And the facts are once again missing from the Daily Mirror, as they are missing from the Sun and the rest of the Fleet Street, because the facts are about how the virus is spreading. Why? Wherever it is spreading, why is it spreading? They have not given the facts in the papers today, and they haven't given the facts in the last 9 months. Why is the virus spreading? And what are the various aspects of the process of the spread? And how, and what are the processes, and what are the kind of steps and stages of containing, how to contain the virus? And the reference to people losing jobs, which is what the Mirror is giving credit to Andy Barnum for. What are the jobs that he is concerned about? What are actually jobs? What is objectively defined and really kind of applicable to people and relevant to people's lives, or relevant to the lives of affected people, affected by the virus, affected by the lockdown, and affected by the curbs. That is to say, the restrictions on 3 kind of levels. Level 1, that is called Tier 1, T-I-E-R, Tier 1, Level 2, Tier 2, and Level 3, Tier 3, which is the severest form of the 3 levels or 3 tiers. What are the entailed, involved elements, factors, aspects of the engagement and the contacts with the virus? And how are the tiers kind of relevant to the dealing with the virus, and how is this operated, how does this happen, what's the mechanics, what's the actual physical kind of link and linkages? The newspapers are not saying that. The newspapers are not saying anything about that. And the newspapers, Fleet Street papers, are supposedly full of news about the virus, about the pandemic, about the restrictions, about the lockdown, and about the implications and impact of the lockdowns and the restrictions on the economy, on livelihoods and lives of people. So, where are the facts? This is called world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. That is why we call it the world exclusive diagnosis, because we are evidentially demonstrating that there is no news in Fleet Street papers. And they're not even views, because views have to be credible and based on evidence, but there is no views. There is slogans, and there are lies, and there are kind of scripted diversions and spin and spiels. Now, spiels is spelled Spiels. So there is no H in there, but there is a pronunciation is done by assuming an H there, spiel, an H after the sp. Yes. Now, on a smaller note on page 2, the Daily Mirror has got a kind of spot for Keir Starmer, saying that 7 members of the Labour Party or members of the Parliamentary Labour Party quit Keir Starmer's team in protest against his spy bill. So let's read a bit of it. Keir Starmer suffered a major rebellion over a bill allowing undercover agents to commit crimes, with 7 frontbenchers resigning to vote against it. The Labour leader ordered his MPs to abstain on the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill, but 34 voted against, including his predecessor Jeremy Corbyn. Dan Carden quit the shadow Treasury team so he could vote as a matter of conscience. He said it set dangerous new precedent on the rule of law and civil liberties. The legislation would protect spies from being prosecuted if they broke the law while undercover. But critics believe it is open to abuse by the police and security services. Now, that item, by any objective, democratic, human rights and accountability and transparency kind of ground and criteria and basis, should have been the lead item on the front page of the Daily Mirror, because that has substance in terms of the facts, whereas the revolt, northern revolt they attribute to Andy Barnum, doesn't exist, doesn't have substance in the way that it should have substance for the item to be called revolt. The revolt is actually by those MPs that revolted against Keir Starmer and voted against the Boris Johnson fascistic bill that exonerates and gives impunity to UK security service personnel from accountability even after they torture or do worse to suspects that they interrogate and arrest and so on. So what we have here is a complete, absolute, typical fake news by the Fleet Street papers. Fake news day, Friday, by Fleet Street papers, which are peddling complete inventions and deviations and diversions from the real kind of activities and real events. Just to recap on what we said earlier, it is not criticizing, the Daily Express is not criticizing Brenda, but is celebrating Brenda out and about without any mask. And then there is this other piece of the Daily Mirror, this the ticking bomb. The Daily Express is doing the ticking bomb one, time bomb, as 26 million general practitioners kind of patients miss the appointment. And so therefore this is a continuation of the pandemonium propaganda for Boris Johnson fronted regime. It's pandemonium propaganda because it's not looking at the actual evidence of the virus and not looking at the contextually, proportionately looking at the impact of Boris Johnson's failures on other services that the government and the state and the local councils should be held accountable for delivering, and they're not delivering. And the collective, the combined kind of impact of the failures of the Fleet Street papers and the complicity with Boris Johnson. This item about why Regals dare. I mean, this is a completely stupid, irresponsible, insulting piece by the Daily Murdoch Sun, because this is the kind of attitude that they show. For example, the Sun condemned the people of Liverpool and the victims of the Hillsborough disaster by blaming them, the fans, for the disaster that caused the massacre. And the scum has not changed its attitude, despite the fact that it still is, 30 years on, still is boycotted by most people in Liverpool. And the Sun is not bought there, and the Sun is not allowed in most places in Liverpool, Merseyside, where the majority of the victims of the Hillsborough massacre came from. And the fact that there has been 30 years of battle by their relations and the loved ones, the people who died and got injured, it has taken 30 years to get justice through the judicial system, makes the point that we have been making all along, that there is no justice in the judicial system in England. There is a corrupt bureaucracy. And the corrupt bureaucracy is not just in the fact that there is endless obstacles to the ordinary people getting justice through the court system. The corruption is actually so entrenched and so extensive that unless a person or persons go through the obstacles and identify the obstacles and experience the impact of the obstacles, it is not going to be possible to understand just how corrupt, unjust, oppressive, evil, and vile the judicial system is. Let's give an example. Contextually, talking about Brexit, this guy, David Neuberger, who was the just about to retire president of the Supreme Court. It's a kind of highly exaggerated title, President, Supreme Court. These are exaggerated because the actual contents of the behavior, the conduct, the role of these judicial position holders, these do not reflect the grandiose titles, let alone the grandiose dresses, the kind of ancient kind of headgears and other things that they, and the body gear that they wear. Even now in the courts, there are this kind of headgear worn by licensed law traders, mainly barristers, that look completely out of place and obsolete. But they represent the pretension to a tradition and the legacy of well-established judicial kind of processes that were about justice. There never were courts in this country, in England, that were about justice. Think about this, because if there were about justice, then the people that were murdered under them as witches and other people as part of the religious kind of persecution, the people would not have been murdered, massacred, because there would be due process in place. And the today's Daily Mirror piece about the 7 Labour Party MPs who quit Keir's team over spy bill, it actually talks about due process. That is being referred to by Dan Carden, who quit the shadow treasury team so he could vote as a matter of conscience. He said it was dangerous new precedents on the rule of law and civil liberties. Now, rule of law and civil liberties are absolutely vital, central to any presumption of the existence and the operation of a judicial system that delivers justice. If the judicial system is expressly being kind of turned into non-existence, as this particular bill supporting torture, impunity being given to Secret Service members of the British state, if that comes into force and Keir Starmer is complicit in the contents and the purpose of this bill, then it shows that not only are the judicial system and its practitioners, its claimants that it exists, not only are they lying and they don't exist, but that the man who is supposed to be holding the current Boris Johnson-fronted cabal to account is also a complicit in the non-existence of that and the denial and the abolition of the presumption of the existence of justice through the judicial system or the judicial bureaucracy, as the facts justify us calling it, not the system. Because the system, the word system, the term system, again, adds, however thinly, a presumption that there is some kind of due process involved. But there is no due process in the judicial system. We shall come back to the judicial system and its corruption and its criminality shortly after talking about the BBC, for example. The BBC, as part of the media, is still, as at this date, Friday, the 16th of October 2020, considered by, of course, the majority of the gullibles, not everyone in this country, but majority of the people who are gullibles, that is gullibles who expressly kind of show their preference for stupidity and stupidity spreader tabloid papers by buying them, subsidizing them, and not noticeably challenging them and their role. The judicial system doesn't exist as a judicial system, and the BBC doesn't, in fact, despite the fact that the gullibles still in large numbers still believe the BBC is reliable, which it is not, but they believe, the gullibles believe. The gullibles believe that the BBC is reliable. The gullibles believe the Sun is reliable. The gullibles believe the Daily Express, the Star, Daily Mail, the Boris Graph, and the Times are reliable. Now, none of these titles is reliable, not because I'm saying so, but because of the evidence of their complicity in spreading lies day in and day out, and suppressing the truth day in and day out, and denying the existence of even the possibility of an alternative kind of report or reporting culture that would put on the table or on the record the facts of the country as events go on every single day, every single hour, every single minute. And the collective kind of conclusion about the role of the Fleet Street newspapers in the last 8-9 months is this: they have not given the facts, as I have said before, and they're not giving the facts even today. Now, the BBC performs a more permanent role, if you like, because the contents of the BBC are, in terms of record and in terms of accessibility, are kind of more widespread or wider spread than the contents of the printed papers. It is partly technology and partly with the kind of storage and the various elements and factors involved in the retention of the storage and the contents of broadcast and published items. Okay. When in Tower Hamlets in East London, the racists murdered Al-Tabali in 1978, that event was not broadcast as having happened by the BBC. I took the first step in getting that published in any significant way, that fact published in a significant way, although it was a very short kind of broadcast in May 1978, and it was broadcast on a kind of not news, but a kind of weekend show. It was called the London Weekend Show. And it was fronted then by Janet Street Porter. And Janet Street Porter came to the Al-Tabali Park, what is now Al-Tabali Park, and spoke to me, where I gave them details of what had happened to Al-Tabali, but they didn't broadcast all of it. They broadcast only part of what I said. But that is the first known intervention by the broadcast media that I had kind of caused to be made after Al-Tabali got murdered in 78. Now, the fact that the BBC didn't actually have any coverage of Al-Tabali's murder until much later shows the BBC's racism in 1978. The racism was made worse by the BBC's lack of relevance to the local communities, the BBC's lack of recognition of the existence of local communities or local areas in London. So when years later, which is now decades later, within the last 3 years, let's say, the BBC allows this Pakistani-born or Pakistani heritage or Pakistani background woman called, what's her name? Her name will come in a minute. Now, Razia Iqbal was allowed to broadcast a completely fabricated piece about the community role in the wake, in the immediate aftermath of the racist murder of Al-Tabali. It was complete lies. So it was a pack of lies, and we shall be discussing item by item, chapter and verse of the pack of lies fronted by Razia Iqbal. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is to show that it's not just the print media that is full of lies and lying to the people, lying about the events, but lying on the record. Now, after Razia Iqbal published that particular pack of lies, I have published, not on this channel, because the publication of her pack of lies came about 2-3 years ago. So I reacted and responded online, in print, and I have kind of not completed the full response item by item. But essentially, I have covered the main perpetration of the lies and inventions. So if the BBC allows somebody as Razia Iqbal, because Razia Iqbal is one of the diversity parades that the BBC operates, that shows that she has got a contribution in appearing to be representing the diversity. Now, that is a perversity that I shall be addressing at another time, except to say here that the fact that somebody of Pakistani origin, let's say Bangladeshi origin, or Indian origin, or African origin, whatever is African or Asian origin, is paraded as part of a kind of team, or as part of a staff, or as part of a frontage of a program, that is what the BBC is doing. They are promoting these physical kind of images and names and connections as proof that the BBC is not discriminating in its editorial policy or in the contents of what it broadcasts and publishes. Now, that is a dishonesty on every level, and that dishonesty kind of tells the community and the public and the people who are accessing any of these programs, tells a pack of lies to them. So therefore, there is no truth in the BBC's behavior in that way. And so therefore, it is in denial of the vaunted, that is to say, much claimed, often claimed kind of BBC commitment to telling the truth. The BBC is not telling the truth. Now, it's not just the BBC's white or anti-Muslim or generally kind of non-Asian or non-African, mainly decision makers. It is also being done, committed by the likes of Razia Iqbal. Now, in her piece, she kind of broadcast footage showing the actual center of the Altawali Park. What is now Altawali Park? The Altawali Park was named more than 10 years or so after Altawali was murdered. But he wasn't murdered in the Altawali Park, what is now Altawali Park, or what is the park. He was murdered where the bus stop used to be, not far from the junction of Whitechapel Road and the side road that Altawali was going to walk through as he was going home to his flat at the time in Wapping or Shadwell. Adler Street, the junction of Whitechapel Road and Adler Street. Now, Adler Street is now to the east side, the eastern border of the park, and Whitechapel Road is the northern border, northern side of the park. But Altawali wasn't walking through the park. He was walking along in the Altawali Park and on his way to Adler Street, probably. Or he was going to go straight walking towards the other side of the building that is situated between Adler Street and the East London Mosque. And he was probably going to go to another side road and cross the Commercial Road into Cannon Street Road or Watney Street or wherever his home was. And Razia Iqbal broadcast footage of the Altawali Park. That was not relevant. That was not anything to do with the murder of Altawali. So why did she show that? And that is a sample of the idiocy and ignorance and invention and fakery on the part of a diversity display on the BBC about a serious matter as the racist murder of a man who was not a public figure. He was a factory worker, and he was only targeted for his race or ethnicity or appearance by the murderers. And this is October. The October month of a Caribbean or African background person. The other one, of course, was white, but another one was Caribbean or African. So in the footage that Razia Iqbal broadcast on the BBC about Al-Tabali's murder, there was no mention as to who the murderers were. And that is part of the kind of criminality done via the BBC by ignorant persons who kind of make money and career by claiming to be talking about racism and fight against racism. The entirety of Razia Iqbal's piece was away from any fight against racism, any opposition to the ideas of racism, any contextual, actual, personal, empirical kind of impulse that drove the murderers of Al-Tabali. And it didn't. Razia Iqbal her piece didn't talk about what happened in the judicial system, what happened in the prosecution, what happened to the murderers of Al-Tabali, and what punishment, if any, did they get, and what are the lessons for all genuine opponents of racism, racist violence, about the role played by the judicial system in racist murders and violence. And the same ignorance and complicity with the narrative of denial that Razia Iqbal showed is exposed in the behavior of the very handful, very small number of Asians or Africans given, quote, jobs, diversity jobs on the Fleet Street papers and Fleet Street outlets. As I have explained before, one of the ones that has been given a platform for the last few years by the Observer is Kenan Malik, Kenan, Kenan Malik. Kenan Malik appears to be of either Indian or Pakistani background person who claimed to have lived in Neom or had connections in Neom or with Neom. He probably has been living in Neom since then, but he claimed to be from Neom at the time in the 1980s when I was engaged in the defense of a woman called Afia Begum in Brick Lane. Afia Begum was under deportation proceedings by the Home Office, of course, the conservative Margaret Thatcher Home Office at the time. And as has been typical of the racist left-wing activists in Britain, kind of appropriating or foisting themselves on communities on occasions like the battle by the community to defend Afia Begum, they expropriated the whole thing and they hijacked it. And they made sure that Afia Begum was deported. Now that kind of pattern is not just evident in what happened on the campaign to keep Afia Begum in this country. Afia Begum was deported by the Tories, aided and abetted by the racist criminals calling themselves the Revolutionary Communist Party. Why am I calling them racist criminals? Because they are racist and criminals, because years later, they appeared, surfaced as living Marxism. And in that capacity, they denied the genocide and massacre of Bosnian Muslims. They denied that by denouncing the ITN news report about that. And that has been, of course, quite widely chronicled because of the fact that the ITN news personnel involved, and one of the kind of journalists involved in that report, who was not from the ITN but from the Guardian or a freelancer, they took action in the High Court, defamation action, and they won against living Marxism. All of that is important because of what is happening now. One of the living Marxisms kind of later version, which is now called spiked, because after losing the defamation action to the ITN, the living Marxism had to fold. So they went underground and they surfaced later as spiked. All the racists and all the criminals in the racist outfit posing as left-wingers and revolutionary socialists and communists then became ardent Brexiteers, ardent opponents of migrants, including opposing the New Zealand Muslims who were murdered, massacred in the mosques. So Kenan Malik was connected with those ones in the 80s. What connection he had after the 80s and what connection he has now is not material, because what he writes in the Observer is material, and he is pursuing the same very craftily, because he doesn't want to be caught at the Observer as doing the same thing as the living Marxism or the lying Marxism and the revolting communist kind of racism. But he's perpetrating the line which denies the Muslims any say about the facts that so much anti-Muslim hatred has been piled on the ordinary Muslims. Nothing to do with any radicalism, nothing to do with anything politically linked with Muslims and Islam. But because of the faith of Muslims, the Muslim community has been defamed by denial in the pieces that Kenan Malik has been getting the bylines for at the Observer. So we shall be updating on Kenan Malik. This one is part of the diagnosis of the racist Fleet Street and diagnosis of the lying Fleet Street, lying media. And what is happening in the other parts of the media is, for example, the Guardian has got one or two or three or four or five other names that are mainly they are Hindu names based on Indian backgrounds. So therefore, there is no kind of telling as to what role they are playing about denying Muslims the say. And the fact that there is no Muslim from the subcontinent on the staff of the Guardian or as a columnist on the Guardians tells a bigger story than the absence of any, especially anti-Muslim kind of contribution or content by those three named Hindus on the Guardian. One is Rajiv Sayal, and another is Bikram Dodd. Now, those two kind of avoid any overt anti-Muslim kind of copy. But the fact that they don't represent, that they don't write about racism aimed at Muslims is very significant. And that is part of the Guardian's agenda. So that is part of the world exclusive diagnosis. Nothing to do with being against the Guardian having these 2 persons or 3 persons on their staff. It is the role that they play. And if they were Muslims, like Rajia Iqbal, they would be playing the same role. So essentially, the BBC and the Guardian and others mainstream kind of outlets in Britain are operating a narrative and an agenda against Muslims having the say or equal say, not because of any political organization of the Muslims. I make that very clear. But Muslims just being Muslims. And that is part of the sickness of the media. And as I have outlined about Razia Iqbal's role in publishing a kind of fiction and a footage containing views of the Altavali Park in the current setting. And it has no reference. Razia Iqbal has no reference to the actual campaign that we mobilized against racism in the wake of the murder of Altavali. I was already organizing actions and activities against racism for years before Altavali was murdered. So the only relevance to organization or organized kind of activities after the Altavali murder refers to those who weren't doing any anti-racist activities. We shall come back to that in due course, but now there is a kind of reference. Recently, there have been references to the Battle of Brick Lane. Battle of Brick Lane is the name of a title that has been written by an Indian called, we shall come to the name in a minute. And he was an activist, so-called. He was a member of the thing called Haque Asian Association. And this person kind of imposed himself on the Bangladeshi community in Brick Lane in the weeks after Altavali was murdered. And he was one of the people, Asian persons from Hackney addresses that came to Tower Hamlets, apparently to solidarize with the community, the Bangladeshis, in the activities against the racists that had murdered Altavali and other racists that had been operating in Brick Lane before and since the murder of Altavali. And this person was kind of part of the gang or group that had Patrick Kodikara. Now, Patrick Kodikara is a Sri Lankan, or was a Sri Lankan. And he appeared to be assuming that the Bangladeshis didn't know about how to organize resistance against racist attacks, or that they somehow lacked something that he could offer. That is different from him coming here into Tower Hamlets to solidarize and support and to say, what can I do to help? He was clearly posing as the leader of the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets. And the other one, who was a Bengali, Olok Bishwas. There were 2 Bengalis from West Bengal, and the Olok Bishwas was the one that has continued to remain relevant in a clandestine way. Bishwas has been responsible for the fake book whose title calls the fictitious events as Battle of Brick Lane. The Battle of Brick Lane, there was no Battle of Brick Lane as claimed in that fictitious account. And the fictitious account is given the authorship credit to somebody who could not write this book and cannot write this book. Now, why are they doing this? Whatever they are doing this for, they are most certainly not doing it to oppose racism. They are not doing it as part of the defense of the community. They are not doing it to make this British society a racism-free or anti-racist or non-racist society. And they're not doing it to help the community in the East End of London any better. So this campaign, community, defense of the community in the East End of London, the Khudilar campaign is called the campaign defending the community in the East End of London for these reasons. There is no other outlet or campaign or platform that says it is defending the community in the East End of London. Nobody can just appear and claim to be doing that. Unless, of course, they identify with the community, they understand the needs of the community, and they have contributed and have the commitment to contribute to the defense of the community, which we have. And we have been doing it for decades. Since long before Crossrail, whole plot was plotted against the community in the East End of London. So we shall be continuing this diagnostic evidential updater commentary in the context of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street and its lies. In part, the next part, whatever the part number is called,